Hi everyone, my name is Ray, or some of you might know me as Tiki with Ray, and today we are going to be doing a book review about a controversial book about Sunny Sun.
Controversial.
I'd say it's controversial.
Oh, okay. That's good. Good start.
Yeah.
All right.
And,
why is it controversial?
Well,
You can tell we didn't rehearse what we were
that's what like we usually rehearse. Okay, Stephen. And now you
Fair
say
point.
this and you say this. So, to the uninitiated, you may not know who Sunny Sun is, but actually Sunny Sun is the ex-wife of Don Beach. It's an interesting book because it's her daughter Karen wrote the book. Mm-hmm. But you and I both think that she kind of probably is more of like an oral thing more than like actually like writing down.
Well, yeah, it's more anecdotes, and there's some great stories. The first story in the book, which I don't know the sources, but it is a great story. In fact, I won't even give it away, so people might be enticed to read the book about Don Beach. But it's I would say it's a series of anecdotes.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be based on her mother, but it's also based on Karen Sun's own life.
Yeah.
And it's also centered kind of sort of around Don the Beachcomber, because as you mentioned, Sunny Sun, the ex-wife, and the story in the book was that Sunny Sun, when they were, I don't know if they were engaged or married at the time, he got thrown in jail, maybe for bootlegging, and he needed bail money, and she bailed him out, and in consideration she had a contract signed that she'd get half of everything related to Don the Beachcomber. And so the story in the book, and there are other stories I've heard, but the story in the book is that's how Sunny Sun got ownership and control. And when they divorced in about 1940 or 41, Sunny took control of the U.S. restaurants and bars, whereas Don Beach himself took over Hawaii, but did not on the mainland. Although, as the book kind of sort of points out, and I wish it went in more detail, Don Beach was an advisor for the U.S. restaurants. And so what we're talking about is I guess the original Hollywood place, but that moved in 1937 across the street. Then the book mentions another one of the LA restaurants that she managed, two Don Beach locations.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where the second one was after the Hollywood on McAdam Place. Then the most interesting stories relate to the founding of the Chicago Don the Beachcomber.
Palm
Springs. And then the other ones, I guess Sunny Sun sold her interest in the 50s, and I guess she died in about, 70, of complications from cirrhosis of the liver, no less.
Yeah.
As the book says. So when we go back, the other restaurants were subsequent. Karen Sun, and again, she drops a lot of tantalizing hints and stories, but doesn't like go fully in depth. But she ran the Chicago and maybe Palm Springs and had an ownership interest, certainly in Chicago.
Yeah.
Says in the book that in the 70s she sold her interest, but left millions of dollars on the table because she got bad advice in selling the place. Now, this is one of those areas I wish she had gone into more detail about. Okay, what was the bad advice? Did she sell too cheap? Does she think she should have kept the place alive? And the one thing about the Chicago that's very interesting was the mob connections.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
That the Chicago Don the Beachcomber was funded by the mob, according to the book.
So the reason why I find it controversial is maybe my just not knowing the full, true lineage of the history of the Don the Beachcomber restaurant. When I got into Tiki, and for a long, long time, I assumed that you had Don Beach, who opened up all these Don the Beachcomber restaurants across the country. And then I knew that like they got married, and then eventually they got divorced, and then she got the ownership of all the American
The mainland,
things.
yeah.
But the thing that I find that I did not know is that as far as ownership, Don really was only part of like the original one, or the one that moved across the street, and then like maybe another. And almost like by the time they get to Chicago or Palm Springs, he's more of an advisor.
Right. He's out
As opposed to an owner. So the thing that I find controversial about it is that she goes on to create all these other Don the Beachcomber restaurants, but he doesn't really have anything to do with those. He's there in name. He might have like consulted, but they weren't his.
Yeah, he in the book he comes to rearrange the chairs, for instance, or maximize the kitchen.
To back a little bit, I read the book, the Mai-Tai book from Tim Glasner. Have you read that book?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's definitely worth reading. It's really, really good. And I remember reading in the book how it was talking about how a lot of the Don the Beachcomber bartenders, specifically up in Chicago, went to the Mai-Tai and became bartenders there. And I remember reading about it and thinking like, and the tone of it was kind of like, oh, that was like a good thing. And I'm thinking like, no, wait, well, why would they leave Don to go work for some new tiki bar that's opening up in Florida? And then what I learned from the book is that, she had a drinking problem, and she wasn't a happy drunk. In fact, she was actually, when she was drunk, she was actually pretty cruel. Like she would do things where she would like yell at her employees, fire people on the spot, and it was easy for them to leave her. The allegiance to Don was a different story. They did like Don. But he was more of like a face man to the restaurant than anything.
Yeah, I wish I think that's right, but you're reading the subtext into the book. So I wish the book had maybe brought that out because I think that's a really interesting perspective. But also too, I mean, Ray Buin isn't mentioned by name in the book, although some of the original Filipino bartenders who worked with Don Beach are named. But Ray Buin, I always assumed, and I don't know, maybe people watching this who know Tiki tea better.
Yeah.
Their Tiki tea mug here for that reason. I also thought, too, that after working with Don Beach or at Don the Beachcomber, that the secrecy of the ingredients, the way everything was compartmentalized. What the book does a pretty good job of explaining that when Don Beach and Don the Beachcomber was first founded, it was probably during Prohibition. It was before Karen's son was born, but during Prohibition, although the official story is that it magically opened on the day that Prohibition ended, and that it was a speakeasy. And I'm wondering, Don Beach was famous for having the drinks prepared in the back, not at the bar. And that each of the mixes were...
they were codes.
Were coded, and...
Well, the famous Don's mix...
number...
tiki spices, all that different stuff. And the bartenders would know to be like, okay, well, this is an ounce of this one, this is an ounce of this. But they wouldn't necessarily knew what...
Right. And we have...
what they
we
were
have
made
Beach
out
Bum
of.
Berry to thank largely for reverse engineering and deciphering a lot of that recipes. So my assumption is, and again, the book doesn't discuss this, was that whether or not you're in love with working for Don the man, because apparently, according to the book, he was super charming guy and quite a womanizer.
And that being said, that's pretty much the reason why she divorced him. And another interesting thing is they were actually not married for very long. And in fact, probably like a couple years.
Yeah.
And I question, But the thing about it is like, you're right. He was in jail, and he needed money, bailout money, and no one was able to hook him up. And then she's like, "I'll get you the bail money, but then I get like half of the."
Yeah.
And then he does it. And that being said, he didn't. For the record, he didn't want to do that. He did it because he had to. He had no choice. And I guess there was many times where he would be like, "Hey, can I buy you back out?" And she's like, "No." Yeah. So it isn't. It's this weird thing where it's sort of like it's almost like she like used him to further her own goals.
Yeah. So coming back to what I was saying about Ray Buin and Tiki T, and I'd like to know where the truth lies is that Don Beach wanted control, but he didn't, when you read the book, he didn't want to suffer the details of the business, whereas Sunny Sun was the person who had the trusted advisors and could keep the books and could keep it running and make sure it didn't run into bankruptcy. Because Don Beach seemed sort of like he wanted control, but at the same time he was sort of aloof from the business day to day and the necessities. And he needed a Sunny Sun who she was both the face and hostess along with Don Beach, but also she and then her daughter at a young age and trusted bookkeepers.
Yeah.
And then they talk about Chicago and the people who they felt did them wrong and were fired either to form, although they don't name names, which I wish the book had, competing restaurants or not. So coming back to my theory is, when you were talking about the guys who went from Chicago to the Mai-Tai, or when I'm talking about Ray Buin when he left Hollywood to form his own establishment, I think these guys probably wanted some sense of their own control because of the secrecy of the drinks.
Yeah.
Which my theory is it started during Prohibition because you wanted everything secret because you didn't want the authorities to know you were mixing booze.
Yeah.
And maybe that spilled over into the secrecy of the recipes and the drinks.
Yeah.
But even if you love working for Don Beach and whether or not you like working for Sunny Sun, it would seem to me you'd want some element of control to be known not as a bartender who just serves a secret concoction that you may not have invented or had a hand in to forming your own drinks. And my one go-to drink at the Tiki Tea is, of course, the one secret recipe at the Tiki Tea.
Raised Mistake.
Raised Mistake.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's ironic or not, but I think that's fitting. So yeah, it's
or another thing to think about too, Stephen, is like, I mean, sometimes you forget about, like, you know, we talk about like it's like all mythology and like legendary, like the original Don the Beachcomber restaurants and stuff like that. But you got to figure, like, back then for these guys, it was just a job. I'm sure. Okay, yeah, this is a good deal, but I don't think they were like, But if a better opportunity presented themselves, there's nothing stopping them from taking it. I mean, you got to remember, Ray Buin also worked at the Dresden.
Yeah.
And I think he was at the Dresden before he opened up the Tiki Tea.
Although the book says that Sunny Sun and Don Beach paid these guys the prevailing wage and there was no discrimination because they were immigrants, which the book hints was prevalent at the time. It's kind of interesting, that background. And again, the book doesn't fixate or focus necessarily on Don Beach. It's a little bit diffuse.
He's really kind of only at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
And then it continues on with Sunny. On Tiki Central, there was a thread on all the Don Beachcomber locations. And I was looking through and they were showing, like, people were like posting up pictures or matchbooks. And then all of a sudden, like, there was one in Seattle. And I'm like, what? There was a Don the Beachcomber in Seattle, and it was like, and then I saw like the address, and there was a picture. I'm like, oh yeah, well that's like a Chinese restaurant that's been there for like ever. And I'm like, well, how long did it last? And it was like, it literally lasted like a couple years. Like you can count the years on your hand. And then I start looking at some of the times of when these Don the Beachcomber locations lasted. And a lot of them did not last all that long.
No, and what's interesting about
Grand opening, grand closing,
the dates are hard to follow, both
Yeah.
in the book but also in real life, because it's a counterpoint to Trader Vic's.
Yeah.
Where Trader Vic's, I think we can all figure out pretty easily where a Trader Vic's was and what it was a lot more centralized or franchised. It's franchised today, and where the locations are, when they existed. There's something kind of loosey-goosey about the Don Beachcomber name over history, and who owned it, and what places were entitled to use it, what places were trading off the name, because as Sunny Sun says, somebody in Chicago actually stole glassware and tried to use it to form his own location on the East Coast. It's a little vague as to what was going on there. That there were other Beachcomber restaurants out there, but they may have been trading off of the Don Beachcomber name. Sunny Sun kind of says that, but whether they officially use the name Don, but the whole Beachcomber as a name, it seems like there's a whole interesting, interesting to me, intellectual property not to unwind.
There was
going historically.
Well, I guess there was a couple locations up in Canada called the Beachcomber. Even like where I grew up in the coal region, there was a town really close to where I lived called Mount Carmel, and there was a tiki bar there called the Beachcomber.
Yeah.
So the name Beachcomber isn't too. You're right.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, and just so everyone knows, you had the Don the Beachcomber location that was down in Huntington Beach, Seal Beach.
Yeah, that one was.
And then that actually had nothing to do with the Don the Beachcomber chain. And the owners of it used the name as an homage to Don the Beachcomber. But that had nothing to do with it.
I thought they got the rights to it in the late 90s or
they might
2000s.
They might have gotten their blessing, but it was not a Don the Beachcomber location.
Yeah.
Unlike the Don the Beachcomber chain that's now starting to open up down in Florida.
Right.
There's the one. That is officially a Don the Beachcomber.
But Trader Vic's, on the other hand, is a lot more.
Trader Vic's was Trader Vic's.
The history is a lot more easy to. Although there are a lot of, not a lot, but a number of places that use the Trader as well as the Beachcomber.
Yeah.
Trader Vic's is a lot more centralized and historically easy to identify. Which leads me to the one tantalizing bit in the book at the beginning of one chapter.
Yeah.
Was. Karen Sun writes that her mother, Sunny Sun, got along well with Steve Crane, who founded the Luau in Beverly Hills, a famous tiki establishment, which, by the way, if I was just watching Bosch, if you ever watched that show on Amazon, the Bosch second edition, I guess you call it, and he's wearing a Luau Beverly Hills t-shirt. How cool is that?
Yeah.
Anyway. That while Sunny Sun got along well with Steve Crane, that she did not get along with Vic Bergeron, Trader Vic's.
Yeah.
And then she drops a parenthetical that's driving me nuts, because she goes, in part because he wouldn't honor the 50-mile rule. And I'm going, what? Did they have like this antitrust thing going on, violation going on, where they say you can't have a restaurant within 50 miles?
Well, who came up with that rule? Was it her?
Well, or the mob? I mean, Chicago was the interesting part of the book. Again, is Chicago and the mob to me. That was a lot of details. Not a lot of details, but the details that were there were very interesting to me and eye-opening. Yeah. The involvement of the mob, and that Sunny Sun stood up to the mob, according to the book, because she would not allow gambling in this establishment, quote, Casablanca, and that upset the mob that Karen Sun had a bodyguard from age 13 to 21 to make sure that the mob wouldn't off her, because some mobster had said to Sunny Sun, "Nice daughter you got there."
Oh God. Yeah. So it's not all cut and dry.
No. And by the way,
it's definitely not cut and dry.
Apropos of nothing else, I should throw in there, as Karen Sun herself throws in there. Most people assume that Karen Sun is the daughter of Don Beach, but she's not. It was a subsequent husband. So Don Beach was not her father. Although she hints that he was a father figure at times, and that she got along very well with him. So that's interesting too. I guess a preview of coming attractions. There is a movie out now called Dawn of Tiki, D-O-N-N, a play, which is I guess it's a biography of Don Beach that fills in a lot of the details that the book doesn't. I was a Kickstarter backer, so I'm waiting for the movie to come out to Kickstarter sponsors, and then we'll be able to talk about the movie. I was hoping we could talk about the book and movie together, because I believe Karen's son, when I look at the previews of the movie, is interviewed.
Yeah.
So she can fill in some of the stories, but to use a fancy word, to contextualize it around Don Beach. And the book is purportedly about Sonny's son. The other thing that Karen's son does say is that although Sonny's son was new and friends with Joan Crawford, that she didn't want to make this book a mommy dearest book, but
it kind of does.
But it kind of does, and what comes off Sonny's son doesn't look well, because she was a mean drunk and an alcoholic, and as we all know, that's a lethal mix.
Yeah, it is kind of sad. I mean, it is like, it is what it is, kind of thing, you know. Okay, well, would you recommend the book? Would you recommend this book to me?
I would recommend, for those who want to learn more about Don Beach and the Don the Beachcomber restaurants, this book would supplement, and that's why I was hoping we could get access to the movie soon, supplement sort of the context of Don Beach.
Yeah.
It's a valuable resource, but it's not a thorough history with footnotes and well-sourced. It's more anecdotes.
Yeah, it's not a tell-all, really.
Well, it's a tell-all, but it's not a thorough...
But it's not telling all.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
I
would recommend it as a supplement to, if you want to learn more, or those people who know more than I do, and there are a number of you who watch this, who know more about Don the Beachcomber and its history. This is nice because it may fill in some gaps there and give some context to the Sonny son. As you said, I was surprised how early she took over, basically, according to the book,
how quick
the operations of Don the Beach.
And how early Don was out of the picture. Yeah. And I recommend the book, too. It's not very long. It's only like, a couple hundred pages. I think it's a good starting point to learn if you really want to get... If you want to get past the mythology when it comes to like a lot of tiki stuff here, this is a good start. And like, for example, the zombie. Mm-hmm. The story is that Don, a salesman, came into the bar and said to Don, "Make me up something." And then Don created, what would be the zombie. The guy drank it. And it like knocked him on his ass. And then he came back the next day and he was like, "What was that drink? Now I feel like a zombie." But the truth is, it was actually Sonny.
Oh, the book version says it's Sonny, yeah.
Yeah, and even on top of that, it wasn't even like she was like a customer. They were workshopping the drinks that would ultimately become the zombie, because they made a couple different ones, and she was like, "Oh, I like that one." So it was her who actually said that. And
well, and the story that I won't retell because it's the best story in the book is at the beginning, but it makes me interested for dress codes at tiki bars.
Yeah,
that people used to wear suits and ties to Trader Vic's and even Don the Beachcomber.
Yeah,
which in its very first original place, as the book points out, was infested with all sorts of nasty critters and rodents, and was not a happy. I mean, it sounded like a pretty divey dive bar, and yet people were expected, women in skirts and men in suits. Or jackets, at least, if not ties. So it's interesting.
So Don the Beach was not only the first tiki bar, but the first tiki dive bar. Want to support the Tiki with Ray show and look cool doing it at the same time? Then head over to tikiwithray.com and buy yourself a Tiki with Ray shirt. They're only $20. Tony Canepa did the design, and they're screen printed in America.